Hello and welcome, everybody, to the next episode of the Free Speech Forward podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bush, co-founder of the sponsoring organization 1776 Forward, in partnership with our other co-sponsor, the Institute for Liberal Values. And today we are so excited to have Frank Xu with us on the phone. Hi, Frank.
Hey, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being with us. So before we dive in, for our listeners out there, Frank is the president for an organization called Californians for Equal Rights Foundation. He's also a co-founder of San Diego Asian Americans for Equality and board member of PUSD Community Watch. Frank served as the statewide finance chair for the No on 16 campaign in California back in 2020. He has been committing his time and effort to the case of equal opportunity since late 2013. After organizing several rallies against discrimination towards the Chinese community, he realizes that the only way to empower the community is to serve and get involved. He was a board member of Educational Technology Advisory Committee and Budget Review Advisory Committee in Poway Unified School District. He also served as an alternate board member of County of San Diego Health Advisory Board. So we're delighted to have you, Frank. So we'll just dive right in. We usually like to start off by letting you have the floor to tell us your story. Have you always been an activist for free speech causes and a leader on that issue, or how did you get into that?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Chris. So indeed, my major cause is equality and equal opportunity, that, as you mentioned in the intro. But I figured that on the path, the equality actually is intertwined with the freedoms of speech issue. So, for example, in the case in 2017, when San Diego Asian Americans for Equality brought a case against San Diego Unified, we actually advocated for equality when they had a policy that giving preferential treatment to Muslim students only. And we just demand the policy should be equal to everyone. But it ends up, we figured out when we quote the Constitution to sue them, it's the First Amendment issue. Yeah, and we had and eventually we won that case by settlement. The San Diego Unified actually agreed to change their policy, their anti-bully policy, to include all students instead of just Muslim students.
Wow, interesting. So it was deemed a free speech issue from whose perspective, yours or the I guess defendant?
From us, from the plaintiff, because
I see.
Yeah, it's like so it falls into the freedom of religion practice.
Yes,
so
first. Yeah,
I actually learned from the process. Whenever we say freedom of speech, we always think about, hey, when I say anything, the government cannot interfere with my right? Cannot violate my rights. But also, the government cannot play favorism to some religion as well. So that means when the government made a policy that favors a specific religion or a specific group of people, that's also a violation of the First Amendment for other people. So I learned that during the process as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great lesson, and one maybe sometimes people forget, which is that would be government respecting an establishment of a religion, right? If they favor one over the other, and that's the clear, plain text of the First Amendment states that's a no-no. So I love how you connected also the speech with the action, right? Because it's not enough to merely be able to have the freedom to think what you want, but you also have to act on it. And speech, in our view, one of the reasons why we even started this podcast was we see speech as such a fundamental right that bridges between those two parts of ourselves, thought and action. So well said.
Yeah, and I think the freedom of speech has some spiritual foundation here as well. So, for example, the foundational assumption is that every one of us will make mistakes, right? So it's very critical for us as human beings, as creators, to be able to listen to the other side of stories, even though sometimes that's not pleasant when you hold an opinion very strongly. But the other side of story actually help you to have a better view of the cause and help you shape what you should think. So I think that's very important part of the freedom of speech that actually make our society much better collectively. So that's how I view the freedom of speech.
I couldn't agree more, and that's wonderfully said. In fact, you beat me to at least in part our second question, which was why do you see free speech as important both to society at large, but also yourself? So, I mean, you just answered wonderfully, I think, the society part. But if you'd like to add anything or even speak to why it's important to you personally, feel free.
A little bit of my background. I was born and raised in China. So that country now is managed by Chinese Communist Party. It's moderate about limiting people's speech. So I lived through that before I moved to the United States. So it's just horrible. So I give you the recent example. So the Chinese economy has been struggling in the past a couple of years, right? And the top the top officer Xi Jinping just didn't want to admit it, and all the newspaper, all the people in China, they just dare not to say anything about it. So they just let the policy, their economic policy, go through without check and balance. And the people suffered. The people suffered. And now all of a sudden, somehow Xi Jinping realized that the Chinese economy is suffering. And he changed the entire policy suddenly last week. And again, the newspaper dare not to say anything against his policy. Their stock market now is surging. It's like 30%, 40% increase in 3 to 4 trading days. That's crazy. That's crazy. And when I talked with my friends who still live in China, everyone turned from super pessimistic to super, had a super great
bullish or optimistic. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I told them, no, that should not be the case. You should still be concerned. But she just told me, there is no other opinion at all they can see in China, and it's very concerning. And I believe that will lead the country into a worse situation. I believe that happens in Russia, in Iran, in all these countries that limit freedom of speech. And I just don't want the similar situation happen in this beautiful country, right? And I have call it a home right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but unfortunately, California is in the wrong direction in terms of the freedom of speech.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly are. We share your concerns at 1776 Forward about the direction even here by looking at those examples abroad. But I think you hit on a great point of just also enabling and facilitating the free flow of information so that you can change course and improve either at the individual level or the societal level much quicker and more effectively when you have that open dialogue and open information. So there definitely are warning signs even here in the U.S. So your note of caution or warning is definitely taken seriously.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Especially when they weaponize the words like misinformation, disinformation. I'm not sure if I'm pretty sure you heard the latest speech by John Kelly about he wanted to he thought the First Amendment is the major block for him to fight disinformation. That's
Yeah.
the
I did. I didn't see the whole speech. Wasn't particularly interested, but I caught the main clips, and I did watch it in full so that no one can claim it's taken out of context. It was very clear what he meant, and I found it. Yeah, he basically said the First Amendment is the major impediment to effectuating major policy change in the U.S., and implied that if the left wing, I guess, in the U.S. context, he was advocating for got enough power that they could maybe change that. So that was the gist for those of you listening who didn't hear about that. But I was just struck how bold he was in saying that so openly. Granted, he wasn't on U.S. soil, which is always a favorite pastime of enemies of American Bill of Rights, is to attack them on foreign soil. So that's in keeping with a long and infamous history. But nonetheless, the fact that he felt confident enough to make that kind of statement in the current climate, I think, speaks to how there is a negative shift away from those values here. And that's why we're here on this podcast, is to promote and support other leaders on this area and help others find their voice to stand up and speak out.
Yeah, yeah. And also, it's not just, the misinformation and disinformation tactics are not just used for these ideologies. Those are used to protect those establishments' wrongdoings, actually, to cover up themselves. So, for example, in Powell Unified School District, where I lived in, so last year, the former superintendent was exposed that she bullied her own students because of conflict of interest, because her daughter is in the same softball team in the Del Norte High School, and she used her power to retaliate against her daughter's rival. And when we exposed this to the school board, the first reaction, the first statement released by the school board is, "This is misinformation by the community." I was like, come on, did you do any investigation yet? Right? And we eventually got the media's attention and forced the board to start an independent investigation. And it turned out that's true. and the former superintendent was just fired, in April this year. So, and when we looked back their statement, misinformation, that was just laughable.
Yeah.
And as a public agency, they should gain their trust by being open, being communicative, not by just calling everything misinformation. But that's what California public agencies are doing in every level.
Yeah, and certainly it's probably more acute there, but we see that problem nationwide, right? That those terms have become so commonplace parlance because, the enemies of free speech, or those who don't really want to be fact checked, kind of wield it to stifle debate more than anything, because one person's misinformation is in fact often an inconvenient truth, right? So more often than not these days. So it just makes it that much harder to navigate, obviously, the public domain. But I guess this is maybe a good segue into the next question, which is, in light of that, kind of environment, and since you've got experience dealing with public officials and other public formats, like, can you maybe share a little bit of the insight on how you prepare to communicate your ideas effectively in a public forum, or to stand up for causes you believe in?
Yeah, so I think first of all, right now when I try to make speeches, I try my best to do more researches. Sometimes it seems like an extra cautious, but I think I still believe that it's necessary. And also, I actually read a lot of the mainstream reports,
Mm-hmm.
so that at least I can get some facts and get some of their opinions
Mm-hmm.
to shape my thoughts as well. So I need to enjoy the freedom of speech, the bright part, and also the unpleasant part, right?
Mm-hmm.
To make sure that I get all the facts straight and right. And in the meantime, when it turns out that I'm on the right side, and
Mm.
I will encourage people to stand up, to speak the truth, and really, especially in California, we need the courage, and we can find 3 or 4 friends and to speak up in the school board meeting at the same moment. We will encourage each other, and also you know, give each other a hand, and also research help, so that we can stand our ground firmly. So a team effort is very important in terms of speak up. Yes,
Yeah.
and speaking back to education, so I would say right now the problem in the public education is to encourage the students to be active. So that's called activist civics. So that means, and that ideology already appears in today's journalists and the judges.
Mm-hmm.
So that means they already have an agenda set for their reporting. So they try to get away from the facts that are inconvenient to their agendas, and only report those facts that can prove their narrative. And that's another type of attack to freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm.
So when we advocate, we need to be very cautious about that, and we need to do as much research as we can, so that we can present the fair fact to the public. We don't want to fight fire with fire. We
Right.
want to present all the facts straight.
Right. You want to still defend philosophically liberal values, and chief among them are reason and reality based facts and truth. Right. And so, certainly intentionally biased or even agenda driven reporting of events is not always, or even often, going to present the facts and just the facts, right? So, and I find that whenever you're a heretic, dissident, or even just minority outside of the mainstream perspective or wisdom, it is a little bit more onus on us to do that extra homework and kind of do a lot more work than it is for those who are just parroting what everyone else already accepts as true or believes, right? So, but it is, it's certainly a worthy cause, and as I think you alluded to, it usually has a much bigger impact than you think once you find that courage to speak up. So, I appreciate that.
Yeah, exactly. And thank you. And I really want to appreciate a 7-year-old student.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, I'm not sure if you heard about
Never,
that case in
no,
Capistrano Unified School District.
no.
So the student was a first grader at the time, and during the Black Lives Matter movement, he actually wrote uh, "All Lives Matter" besides Black Lives Matter in the class,
Hmm.
and he was punished by the teacher and by the school leaders, and
Hmm.
without notifying the student's parents. And
Wow.
yeah, and when the parents figure that out, they are so brave. And so first of all, the student is brave too, and the parents are brave to take the school district to the court. Now the case is represented by the Pacific Legal Foundation,
Mm.
and for my organization, we wrote an amicus brief, filed jointly with the California Policy Center to support the kid. Uh, but you know what? What is frustrating? So the first ruling by the judge, by a far left judge, says that, and you will not believe that, says a 7-year-old does not have full freedom of speech. So, so it is subject to the discipline of the school teachers and leaders.
Mhm.
So, so now we, I mean, the parents are of course appealing to the upper court, and
Yeah.
I firmly believe that they will win the case, even in California. It's
Yeah.
yeah,
That's shocking. I mean, I'm certainly no expert in constitutional law, definitely not California constitutional law, but I'm going to go out on a limb and think that that's precedent setting for which there is no precedent of that view, but maybe I'm wrong. But that's still, you know, to your point, I think it's great that you're at least noting it, because I think it's a good example. The positive of this story is it's never too early, and you're never too young to stand up and speak out for these values.
yeah, and without their standing up against the authorities, we will not know how bad it is in our schools right now. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate them, and I, I believe that they will win the case and will set a good legal precedence for all of us.
Good, good. Well, we'll be watching, and thank you for highlighting and shouting out. That's what the appellate system is for, ultimately, right? To check even judicial excesses sometimes. Last question, and then I think we're going to be out of time. But this is always a fun one, so I'm glad we'll end with this. But we always ask all our guests, if resources, time, money were no object, what would you invest both of those in as what you think might be the most impactful or important initiative to promote free speech and equal opportunity, the values that your organization focuses on?
Yeah, if I have all the resources and money available, I would go to all these dictatorship countries and dig out their history documents and figure out how their misinformation, their uh, their speech censoring led them to self-destruction. And I
Mm.
believe those are great examples to the free world that please keep our right of freedom of speech. I have the faith that for all the bad ideologies and ideas, they will automatically lead to self destruction, no doubt. But the freedom of speech can give us a paper trail back to how these lead to a failure. But
Mm.
dictatorship countries, like Russia, like Iran, and like China, they just
Hmm.
destroyed everything. So you cannot find even paper trail to prove that those
Mm.
cause uh,
I like
cause
that. It's
failure.
it's a case study from the failures, right? From the, I guess,
Yeah.
the enemies of philosophically liberal values and free speech. That's really really great idea.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
But I
Well,
know
thank
it's
you.
very hard.
What's that?
I
No,
know it's
that's
very.
heard of that one. So a lot of people say education, which I mean, better than most that how important that is, that area. But this is a new one, and I really like it. It's got my wheels turning.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time, Frank, and for joining us. For all of our listeners out there, as always, we will drop a new episode every 2 weeks. So we'll see you 2 weeks from now on Tuesday. And as always, you can find us links to our podcast on our website, 1776 Forward, or ILV's website, ilvalues.org. And if you'd like to learn more about Frank's organization, you can find them on cferfoundation.org. Thanks. See you next time. Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Chris.